Hey everyone. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones we make up. They're the ones that actually happened. The experiences that people can't explain. The moments that changed them forever. These are 3 true stories from people who encountered something they'll never forget. Something that still haunts them to this day. Let's begin. This story comes from a woman named Lisa, who was 27 at the time. It happened in the fall of 2019, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. Lisa had been house-sitting for her friend's parents while they were out of town for 2 weeks. It was an easy gig: water the plants, feed the cat, collect the mail. The house was nice. A large 2-story colonial with a big backyard, located on a cul-de-sac with only 3 other houses. Lisa had stayed there before. She knew the family well. The house had always felt comfortable, safe. But this time was different. It started on the 3rd night. Lisa was in the living room, watching TV around 10 p.m. The cat, a gray tabby named Smokey, was curled up next to her on the couch. Everything was normal. And then Smokey's head shot up. His ears went back. His whole body went rigid. He was staring at the hallway that led to the kitchen. Lisa muted the TV. "What's wrong, buddy?" Smokey didn't move. He just kept staring. And then, slowly, his head started to turn, following something. Like he was watching something move from the hallway into the dining room. But there was nothing there. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "Smokey, stop it. You're freaking me out," the cat hissed. A low, guttural sound Lisa had never heard him make before. And then he bolted. Straight up the stairs and into one of the bedrooms. Lisa sat there for a moment, her heart pounding. She told herself it was nothing. Cats do weird things. Maybe he saw a shadow. Maybe he heard something outside. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She got up and walked through the first floor, checking all the doors and windows. Everything was locked. She looked out into the backyard. Nothing. Just darkness and the glow of the neighbor's porch light. Lisa went upstairs and found Smokey hiding under the bed in the guest room. She tried to coax him out, but he wouldn't budge. She decided to just go to bed. She was staying in the master bedroom, a large room at the end of the hall with its own bathroom and a big window overlooking the street. Lisa changed into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, and climbed into bed. She left the hallway light on, just in case. She was almost asleep when she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Coming from downstairs. Lisa's eyes shot open. She held her breath and listened. The footsteps continued, walking through the first floor, from the living room to the kitchen, then stopping. Lisa grabbed her phone and pulled up the security app. The house had cameras, one at the front door, one at the back door, and one in the living room. She checked the living room camera first. Empty. She checked the front door camera. Nothing. Back door camera. Nothing. But she could still hear the footsteps. Now they were coming up the stairs. Lisa's blood ran cold. She sat up in bed, clutching her phone. The footsteps were slow. Methodical. One step at a time. Getting closer. She wanted to call the police, but she was frozen. She couldn't move. Couldn't think. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Then they stopped. Lisa stared at the bedroom door. It was closed, but not locked. She watched the gap at the bottom of the door, where light from the hallway spilled through. And then she saw it. A shadow. Moving across the light. Someone was standing right outside the door. Lisa's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. She opened the dial pad and typed 911, her finger hovering over the call button. The doorknob started to turn. Slowly. So slowly. Lisa screamed. "I called the police! They're on their way!" The doorknob stopped moving. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the shadow moved away. The footsteps started again. Going back down the stairs. Slowly. Calmly. Lisa called 911 for real this time. She was sobbing, barely able to get the words out. "Someone's in the house. Please! Someone's in the house." The dispatcher stayed on the line with her. Police arrived 8 minutes later. They searched the entire house. Every room. Every closet. The attic. The basement. Nothing. No one. All the doors and windows were still locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. No sign that anyone had been there at all. The officers checked the security footage. Nothing. No one entering or leaving the house. No movement in any of the rooms. One of the officers looked at Lisa sympathetically. "You're alone in a strange house. It's easy for the mind to play tricks. Old houses make noise. Pipes, foundation settling, that kind of thing." But Lisa knew what she'd heard. And she knew what she'd seen. She packed her things that night and left. She called her friend the next morning and told her she couldn't finish the house-sitting job. She made up an excuse about a family emergency. She never told her friend what really happened. But here's the thing that still keeps Lisa up at night. A year later, she was scrolling through Facebook and saw that her friend's parents were selling the house. She clicked on the real estate listing out of curiosity. In the comments section, someone had written, "Beautiful house, but just so you know, the previous owner died there. Fell down the stairs in the middle of the night. They say she still walks the halls." Lisa looked up the property records. The previous owner was a woman named Margaret Chin, age 73. She died in the house in 2017. The cause of death was listed as accidental fall. But according to the police report Lisa found online, there was something strange about the scene. Margaret had fallen down the stairs. But her bedroom door had been found closed and locked from the inside. The police never figured out how she got out of her room. This story comes from a guy named Connor, who was 31 at the time. It happened in the summer of 2021, in the mountains of Washington state. Connor was an experienced hiker. He'd been hiking solo for years, all over the Pacific Northwest. He knew how to handle himself in the wilderness. He carried all the right gear, always told someone where he was going, and stuck to marked trails. But on this particular trip, he broke his own rules. Connor had taken a week off work to do some backpacking in the Cascades. He planned out a route, 3 days, 2 nights, covering about 30 miles through some beautiful, remote terrain. Everything went fine the first day. He hiked about 10 miles, set up camp near a small lake, cooked dinner, and went to sleep under the stars. Day 2 started out great. Clear skies, perfect temperature. Connor was making good time. Around mid-afternoon, he came to a fork in the trail. According to his map, he should go left. But there was something about the right path that caught his attention. It wasn't on his map. It looked old, overgrown, like it hadn't been used in years. But it headed up toward a ridge that looked like it would have an incredible view. Connor stood there for a moment, debating. He knew he should stick to the plan. But it was still early. He had plenty of daylight left. What's the harm in checking it out? He went right. The trail was steep and narrow, winding through dense forest. Connor had to push through overgrown brush in some places. But after about 20 minutes he emerged onto the ridge. And the view was incredible. He could see for miles. Mountain peaks, valleys, a river snaking through the distance. Connor took some photos and sat down to have a snack. He'd rest for a few minutes, then head back to the main trail. That's when he noticed the silence. Complete silence. No birds. No insects. No wind. Nothing. Connor had spent enough time in the woods to know that's not normal. There's always some kind of sound. Always. He stood up and looked around. The forest felt different now. Wrong. And then he saw it. About 50 yards away, at the edge of the tree line, someone was standing there. Watching him. It looked like a person. Tall, thin, wearing dark clothes. Just standing perfectly still. Connor raised his hand. "Hey!" The figure didn't move. Didn't respond. Connor felt uneasy. "You okay?" Nothing. Connor started walking toward the figure, but something told him to stop. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to turn around and leave. He took a step back. The figure took a step forward. Connor's heart started pounding. "I'm leaving. I don't want any trouble." The figure took another step forward. Then another. Moving slowly. Deliberately. Connor turned and started walking quickly back toward the trail. He didn't run. He didn't want to trigger a chase response. But he moved fast. He glanced over his shoulder. The figure was following him. Maintaining the same distance. Not closing the gap, but not falling behind either. Connor picked up his pace. He reached the trail and started descending as quickly as he could without losing his footing on the steep, overgrown path. He looked back again. The figure was still there. Still following. Still maintaining that same unsettling distance. Connor's mind was racing. Was this a person? A hiker in trouble? Someone messing with him? Or something else? He finally reached the fork where the two trails met. He took the main trail and started jogging. His backpack bounced against his shoulders. His breath came in short gasps. He didn't look back for a while. He just ran. After about 10 minutes, he finally stopped and turned around. The trail behind him was empty. Connor bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He stood there for a long moment, watching the trail. Waiting to see if the figure would appear. Nothing. Connor decided he wasn't taking any chances. He hiked until it was almost dark, putting as much distance as possible between himself and that ridge. He set up camp in a spot where he could see the trail in both directions. He barely slept that night. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow looked like someone standing there. The next morning, Connor packed up and hiked straight out. He abandoned his planned route and took the shortest path back to his car. He just wanted to get out of there. When he got home, he tried to find information about that trail. He searched online, looked at old maps, even contacted the Forest Service. Nothing. No record of any trail in that area. According to official maps, it didn't exist. But Connor knew it was real. He'd been there. He had the photos to prove it. Except when he looked at his phone, the photos were gone. Not deleted. Just gone. Like he'd never taken them. Connor hasn't been back to that area since. And he doesn't hike alone anymore. But sometimes, late at night, he wonders about the figure on the ridge. Was it human? And if it wasn't, what was it? This last story comes from a man named Eric, who was 35 at the time. It happened in early 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic lockdowns, in an apartment complex in Chicago. Eric lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor. His building was old but well maintained, with about 40 units total. He'd lived there for 3 years and mostly kept to himself. He knew a few neighbors in passing, but that was it. When the lockdown started, Eric began working from home. His desk was set up near the window, which overlooked the building across the alley, another apartment complex, almost identical to his. Eric had never paid much attention to the other building before. But now, spending all day every day at home, he started to notice things. Specifically, he started to notice the apartment directly across from his. 3rd floor. Same level as his. Maybe 30 feet away. The apartment always had its blinds closed. Always. Eric never saw anyone come or go. Never saw any lights on or off. The blinds were just always there. Shut tight. It was strange, but Eric didn't think much of it. Maybe the tenant was never home. Or maybe they worked nights. Whatever. But then, one evening in late March, something changed. Eric was at his desk, finishing up some work around 7 p.m. It was getting dark outside. And for the first time since he'd been paying attention, he noticed something different about the apartment across the alley. One of the blinds was open. Just a few inches. Just enough to create a narrow gap. And someone was standing there. In the dark apartment. Looking out. Looking directly at Eric. Eric felt a chill run through him. He couldn't see any features. Just a silhouette. A dark shape against the deeper darkness of the apartment. He raised his hand in an awkward wave. The figure didn't move. Eric quickly closed his own blinds and stepped away from the window. His heart was racing. He told himself he was being paranoid. It was probably just someone looking out their window, same as him. But it felt different. It felt wrong. Eric tried to shake it off. He made dinner, watched some TV, went to bed. The next morning, he opened his blinds. The gap in the blinds across the alley was still there. And the silhouette was still there. In the exact same position. Like it hadn't moved all night. Eric stared for a long moment, then closed his blinds again. This went on for days. Every time Eric looked, the figure was there. Same position. Never moving. Just standing there. Watching. Eric started keeping his blinds closed all the time. He moved his desk away from the window. He tried not to think about it. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. One night, around 2 a.m., Eric woke up to use the bathroom. On his way back to bed, he passed by the living room window. The blinds were open. Eric froze. He knew he'd closed them before going to bed. He always closed them now. He walked over to the window and looked out. The apartment across the alley was completely dark. The blinds were fully open now. Not just a crack, fully open. And standing in the window, pressed up against the glass, was the figure. Eric could see it more clearly now. It was a person. Tall. Thin. Wearing what looked like dark clothes. But he still couldn't make out any features. The apartment behind the figure was too dark. The figure raised one hand and pressed it against the glass. Then it raised the other hand. And then it started to tap. Both hands. Against the glass. Tap. 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 Eric stumbled backward, his breath coming in short gasps. He grabbed his phone and called the building manager. No answer. It was 2 in the morning. He called the police. The dispatcher asked him what the emergency was. "There's someone in the apartment across from mine," Eric said. They're watching me. They've been watching me for weeks." "Are they threatening you?" "They're just standing there, tapping on the window." There was a pause. "Sir, if they're in their own apartment, there's not much we can do." Have you tried talking to your building manager? Eric hung up. He looked at the window again. The figure was gone. The next morning, Eric went to the building manager's office. He told her about the apartment across the alley. Asked if she knew who lived there. She pulled up the address on her computer. That building's owned by a different management company. I don't have access to their tenant information. Is there any way you can find out? She gave him a sympathetic look. Not really. Why? Eric didn't know what to say. Never mind. He went back to his apartment and called the management company for the building across the alley. After being transferred 3 times, he finally got someone who could help. Yeah, I can look that up for you, the woman on the phone said. What's the unit number? Eric gave her the number. He heard typing. Then silence. Sir? That unit's been vacant for over a year. We're doing renovations. No one's been living there. Eric's blood ran cold. Are you sure? Positive. The utilities are shut off. The door's been padlocked from the outside. Eric thanked her and hung up. He walked to the window and opened the blinds. The apartment across the alley looked the same. Dark. Silent. But now Eric noticed something he hadn't seen before. On the window where the figure had been standing, there were handprints. 2 pale handprints on the inside of the glass. And they were still there. Eric moved out 2 weeks later. He broke his lease and paid the penalty. He didn't care. He just needed to get out. Before he left, he asked the building manager one last time about the apartment across the alley. She made some calls and finally got back to him. Okay, so I talked to their management company. That unit's been empty since March of last year. They've been renovating it, but the work got delayed because of COVID. No one's had access to it in over a year. Eric nodded slowly. Did they say why it was vacant? The manager hesitated. The previous tenant died. Suicide. Jumped from the window. Eric felt sick. When did it happen? She checked her notes. March 15th, 2019. Exactly 1 year before you started seeing whatever you saw.